One.
Welcome to Brian Rouge Show. It's February the 8th, 2019. My guest is Professor Jim Fetzer. He's Professor Emeritus from the University of Duluth, Minnesota, now living in Wisconsin. We're going to talk about Russiagate. So welcome back to the show, Jim. You've been on the show many times before.
Well, thanks, Brian. It's been a great pleasure. And today we're going to be talking about the Russia hoax, which has come apart at the seams. It's pretty fascinating, Brian, and I must say, while you and I have done many video interviews before, including on JFK and 9/11, which were monstrous deceptions upon the American people and highly corrosive, I believe no scandal in American history has been as profound as this involvement of the FBI and the Department of Justice on behalf of a candidate for president in order to trash her opponent in advance of the election and then continue a cover-up to protect her own interests. I believe this is the greatest political scandal in American history.
Great. It's so true. My gosh.
So I'm going to begin with the big picture. I had to decide, Brian, whether to approach this chronologically or analytically. And it seemed to me chronologically we're left in such a state of uncertainty and ignorance until more recent revelations, it made more sense to do it analytically. So I've divided into various sections about the big picture, what was going on, the role of Hillary, the alleged collusion, the DNC hack, so it was called, and so forth, the role of Robert Mueller into separate sections. So let's begin here with a relatively recent observation where a former CIA analyst reported that Obama gave the green light for the NSA and the CIA to sabotage Trump. What you're getting here is an indication of how profound was the depth of this corruption, where former CIA analyst Larry Johnson said that according to his sources, the Obama administration worked with the NSA, the CIA, and Britain's CGHQ, that's their equivalent of our CIA, to disseminate information about Donald Trump that was illegally obtained via surveillance before the election, and indeed much of which turned out to have been manufactured. Here's a further report about it, where the leadership of the DOJ and the FBI are intertwined in the 2016 election operation to support candidate Hillary Clinton and defeat candidate Donald Trump. Most of the investigation discussion centers around the FBI side of the equation. There's a good reason for that. The FBI side of the conspiracy is pretty straightforward. FBI Director James Comey, FBI Assistant Director Andrew McCabe, FBI Chief Legal Counsel James Baker, FBI Counterintelligence Head Bell Priestep, and FBI Counterintelligence Agent Peter Strzok all played a participatory role in the Trump operation. As we'll discover, it was even broader than that, but ferreting out the role of the Department of Justice officials who were involved has become more complex. Here you see a nice layout of the principal figures, which you can see now on the DOJ side, included then Attorney General Loretta Lynch, Sally Yates, who became the functioning Assistant Attorney General, among the key agents of the DOJ, Bruce and Nellie Orr, where Nellie Orr turns out to have played a particularly important role in relation to the so-called Russia dossier. Lisa Page, an attorney for the Department of Justice, Peter Strzok, they were in a romantic relationship and colluding here massively. Then on the other side, we have James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Glenn Simpson, Bill Priestep in the center, very center, the focus of all of this, Hillary Clinton. On the DOJ side, the leadership is less clearly outlined where there's a reason for that. The DOJ involvement surrounds the legal arguments, the processing of the FICE applications, and the use of the legal system to support the FBI with actionable legal framing against Trump, mostly after their candidate Hillary Clinton was defeated. In essence, this is a bastardized manipulation of law and order, the FBI creating disorder and the DOJ weaponizing the manufactured disorder to launch a legal attack against their ideological political opposition, President-elect Donald Trump. You might call it, therefore, unlawfulness and disorder. The National Security Division inside the Department of Justice, where the collaboration appears to have been centered, the NSD, is a subdivision within the DOJ, similar to the counterintelligence division within the FBI. Former CIA officer Kevin Shipp, along with Larry Johnson, is confirmed, exposing the deep state coup against America. Greg Hunter has just released a bombshell interview with former CIA officer Kevin Shipp, who details a deep state coup that's underway right now to overthrow and destroy America and the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. And we'll review how that was set up, how it was rigged for Hillary, and how Trump prevailed in spite of it and was democratically elected by the American people. This is, without question, the most important interview he's done this year to learn how dark the actions are to overthrow the United States government. You learn how James Comey has been a lifelong fixer for Hillary Clinton and his own involvement in criminal money cartel laundering covered up by none other than Robert Mueller. I do believe, Brian, that among the most stunning revelations I will present here today concern none other than Special Counsel Robert Mueller.
This is amazing.
Here we have Proper Not, which was a website that was created to publish the so-called Russia dossier. This appears to be a completely propagandistic outlet. Once it was up, the Washington Post, which has become an instrument of disinformation, made even worse since it's purchased by Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, of course, because of his ownership of Amazon.com, in order to promote the story through a mainstream media outlet. Wayne Madsen has made some very stunning and appropriate observations, these already from December 14, 15, 2016. CIA's allegations against Russian election interference political. Current and former members of the U.S. intel community are lambasting CIA Director John Brennan for waging a political campaign against President-elect Trump based on flimsy intelligence that the CIA director claims ties Russia to interference in the 2016 presidential election. Brennan's secret report on alleged election interference by Moscow has been questioned as fuzzy and inconclusive by U.S. intelligence and law enforcement officials, including Director of National Intelligence James Clapper and FBI Director James Comey. The pro-Saudi Brennan, who according to former FBI agent John Guindalo is a secret convert to Wahhabi radical Islam, continues to proffer the notion that Russia selected Trump as president. Brennan's gambit is designed to convince enough electors to vote against Trump on December 19th when the Electoral College meets in the 50 state capitals. If Trump were denied the 270 electoral votes required, the election would be thrown into the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House would vote for the president, with each state entitled to one vote. The Senate would vote for the vice president, each senator having one vote. It is through this constitutional but rarely invoked process that Brennan and his allies within the CIA seek to select the next president. And let me assure you, Brennan was completely corrupt and has played a major role. He may even be the major motivating factor behind this. Yeah. We have a report, this coming from the New Yorker, that Hillary Clinton paid Christopher Steele to frame Trump. Now, that may sound like an interesting conjecture, but it's been confirmed by none other than Christopher Steele himself, who stunned a British court recently when he admitted in court under oath that he was paid by Hillary Clinton to create a perverted and salacious fake Russia hoax dossier that was used to slander President Trump, and which could also be used as evidence for Hillary's attorney and John McCain to take to the FBI and begin a fake FBI investigation. These are now tying together the major elements of the elaborate hoax. We have had the GOP-led House panel clearing Trump. It did actually, under Devin Nunes, a very thorough and competent investigation which exonerated him quite appropriately. The Republicans didn't let the Trump campaign completely off the hook. They specifically cited the campaign for poor judgment, taking a June 2000 meeting in Trump Tower described in emails to Trump's eldest son, Donald Jr., as part of a Russian government effort to aid his father's presidential bid. I think, frankly, that's an exaggeration. It is true that the woman, who is a Russian lawyer, was presented as having dirt on Hillary Clinton. But gathering dirt on your opponents is, as American as apple pie. Every political party does it. There was nothing illegal or improper about the meeting. And while much has been made of it by the Democrats, in fact, it frankly amounts to a nothing burger, a giant nothing burger, as does the whole hoax. And if you want further evidence about the flimsy character of the alleged interference, Google CEO testified to Congress that the total amount of money Russia spent attempting to affect the election was $4,700, Brian. $4,700. This was a $1 billion campaign. This was a drop in the bucket. Frankly, these big companies, including Google, will drop $4,700 on a lunch or a dinner for their executives. So if you want to get the big picture here, there's a completely brilliant book by Greg Jarrett, The Russia Hoax, The Illicit Scheme to Clear Hillary Clinton and Frame Donald Trump. And he's got it exactly right, because it had these two different sides of the coin. It was not only intended to frame Trump, but to exonerate Hillary. Here's a brief summary. For Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, and I regard him as the best of the best, reveals a real story behind Hillary Clinton's deep state collaborators in government and exposes their nefarious actions during and after the 2016 election. The Russia Hoax reveals how persons within the FBI and Barack Obama's Justice Department worked improperly to help elect Hillary Clinton and defeat Donald Trump in the 2016 election. When this suspect effort failed, those same people appear to have pursued a contrived investigation of President Trump in an attempt to undo the election results and remove him as president. The evidence suggests that partisans within the FBI and the Department of Justice, driven by personal animus and a misplaced sense of political righteousness, surreptitiously acted to subvert electoral democracy in America. This is a brilliant book. It's very clear, very thorough, well-focused, and extensively documented. Brian.
Is it on Amazon, or is Amazon banned it?
Oh, yes. This book is available on Amazon. Amazon, is very selective in its banning. So as you're well aware, they banned my book, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, even though it had 13 contributors, including 6 current or retired PhD professors, because we established that the school had been closed by 2008, that there were no students there, that it was a 2-day FEMA exercise presented as mass murder to promote gun control. So they had to ban it. It was just too threatening to the deep state, even though it had sold nearly 500 copies in less than a month, Brian.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Now I turn to the Obama connection. Mr. President, your predecessor actually wiretapped all of our phones. What are you going to do about it? Trump went on a tweet storm Saturday morning. This is back in 2017, presumably because at some point in the last 48 hours, he learned that his predecessor, Barack Obama, wiretapped the phone lines in Trump Tower during the 2000 election campaign. In the process of tweeting, the president actually confirmed what many of us already know. We are being actively monitored by a domestic police state. Here is a list of 12 victims spied on by Obama. WikiLeaks has revealed that Barack also spied on journalists. It is not unfounded that former President Obama would wiretap President Trump during the election process. That's because he's done this before. Here's a list of individuals who are wiretapped by the Obama administration. Brian, the Democrats continue to believe that Barack Obama was a great president, but he was completely dishonest, corrupt, and a traitor to the Constitution of the United States on multiple grounds. Even his arrangement for Sandy Hook, and this was a Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Eric Holder operation to subvert our rights under the Second Amendment, was a violation of his oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend it, where the Second Amendment states quite baldly that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So here he was going about massively infringing on the 16th of January 2013, just a month and 2 days after Sandy Hook signing 23 executive orders to infringe our rights under the Second Amendment. Here's the following list WikiLeaks revealed of Obama administration wiretaps. The U.S. National Security Agency bugged a private climate change strategy meeting between UN Secretary General and German Chancellor in Berlin. Obama bugged Chief of Staff of UN High Commissioner for Refugees for long-term intersection. Obama singled out the director of the Rules Division of the World Trade Organization. Obama stole sensitive Italian diplomatic cables. Obama intercepted top EU and Japanese trade ministers discussing their secret strategy and red lines to stop the U.S. extorting them. Obama explicitly targeted 5 other top EU economic officials for long-term interception. Obama explicitly targeted the phones of Italy's ambassador to NATO and other top Italian officials. Obama intercepted details of a crucial private meeting between then French President Nicolas Sarkozy, Merkel, and Berlusconi, where the latter was told the Italian banking system was ready to pop like a cork. In addition to the above list, we know Obama wiretapped various individuals in the U.S. media who were reporting information unflattering to the Obama administration. In 2013, the liberal Washington Post expressed outrage after the revelation the Department of Justice had investigated the news-gathering activities of a Fox News reporter as a potential crime in a probe of classified leaks. Also in 2013, members of the EP were targeted for surveillance. A reporter, Cheryl Atkinson, said in 2014 her personal computer and CBS laptop were hacked after she began filing stories about Benghazi that were unflattering to the Obama administration. It's completely outrageous. And yet we have no less a figure than James Clapper, the former head of U.S. intelligence, denying in an interview that Trump's claims it was court-ordered wiretap of Trump Tower prior to the 2016. In Washington, Brian, as a general rule, the bigger the liar, the further you go. This is the same man who, way back when, as early as 2001, was denying that the United States was being subjected to massive wiretaps. Lock him up. Lawmakers renewed charges, calls for James Clapper to be subjected to with perjury. Some lawmakers reacted to the long-expected resignation announcement from Director of National Intelligence Claim Clapper on Thursday by wishing him an eventful retirement featuring prosecution and probable prison time. We have the former Bush Attorney General. Trump was correct that there was surveillance. Former Attorney General Michael Mukasey speaks out in a rare moment of honesty and candor that Trump is likely correct. There was surveillance on Trump Tower for intelligence purpose, but according to this story, incorrect in accusing former Barack Obama of ordering the wiretapping. We know he only has half the story right because Barack Obama was deeply involved in all of this. Former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, whom the authors suspect of authorizing the wiretaps, has urged an insurrection against the government. This is a disgusting creature who should never have occupied high office in the United States. Former AG Loretta Lynch calls for resisting President Trump with marches, blood, and death. This is a violation of 18 U.S. Code 2383, defining sedition. Whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States. I mean, this is absolutely outrageous. Yeah. Here we have Russia Today reporting, Brian, Trump asked Congress to establish whether Obama administration abused its investigative powers in 2016, about which we now know there is no doubt. The White House has asked the U.S. Congress to investigate alleged abuse of executive power by the Obama administration as part of the investigation into alleged Russian interference in the presidential election. The White House request, released on Sunday, was directed to congressional intelligence committees and required them to exercise their oversight authority to determine whether executive branch investigative powers were abused in 2016. It's fascinating, but behind the scenes was the hand of Barack and Michelle Obama, who turn out to be America's most admired man and woman, according to a recent poll. Michelle Obama unseated Hillary Clinton as the most admired woman in the U.S., claiming the title alongside her husband, former President Barack Obama, who has remained the most admired man for 11 straight years, according to Gallup's annual poll. What's stunning about this is that the most admired woman in the world is actually a man with breast implants.
Yes.
This is completely outrageous. Her name was Michael Robinson. She even played football at Oregon State before she transferred to Princeton and changed her name to Michelle. Here's a
That's her. That's her in the photo there. That's him.
That's her in the photo there.
Michelle,
Hussein on the rock on the left, and Michael on the right, in the rightmost photograph. There you see them snuggling together on the left. There you can see Michelle's package, which is evident in many other photographs, a package which most women do not have.
Yeah.
Michelle's doctor goes on record. I know what I saw October 27, 2017. Dr. Rafael Espinoza, who was entrusted with former First Lady Michelle Obama's care during the 2008 presidential election, is speaking out about something he feels the public needs a definite answer on. With all the talk about Mrs. Obama once being a man, Esperanza felt he couldn't keep his mouth shut any longer. I know what I saw. Michelle Obama is not a woman who used to be a man. Michelle Obama is just a man with breast implants and a huge shaving bill. On the campaign trail, no medical staff were allowed to go near her other than to take vitals if she got sick, which she never did. I know what I know because I walked in on her or him while he was taking a leak standing up in a bathroom in Trenton. They paid me millions for my silence, but after seeing what they have done to this country, I just can't keep quiet any longer. Let them sue me.
Wow.
I have a great deal of evidence to back this up, Brian, or I wouldn't be reporting it. Now, many Americans don't realize how massively the election was rigged for Hillary Clinton. It began in California when Jerry Brown passed a motor voter law in 2015 that automatically enrolls everyone as a registered voter when they get their driver's license, unless they decide to opt out of the system. That sounds great, Brian, until you learn that in California, illegal aliens are allowed to obtain driver's licenses and thereby were surreptitiously enrolled to vote. This was part of a scam to drive up Hillary's vote in California. Jerry Brown was complicit. We also have, during an interview with a Latin-oriented YouTube channel, Mitu, with a millennial actress, Gina Rodriguez, she asked Obama, many of the millennials, dreamers, undocumented citizens, and I call them citizens because they contribute to this country, are fearful of voting. So if I vote, will immigration know where I live? Will they come for my family and deport us? To which the President of the United States replied, not true. And the reason is, first of all, when you vote, you are a citizen yourself. And there's not a situation where the voting rolls somehow are transferred over and people start investigating, etc. The sanctity of the vote is strictly confidential. Now look at his violation of the Constitution right there. He's trading on an equivocation between performing the function of a citizen by voting and being legally qualified to vote because you are a citizen. This was Barack Obama sabotaging the Constitution. He took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. We just didn't figure out that he was, in fact, one of them, easily the most prominent. No, in addition, the polls were being rigged for Hillary by up to 9 points. In fact, in some cases, even more. To quote one pollster specifically from the New York Times, Cliff Zinkin said, election polling is in near crisis and we pollsters know. In the following video, you'll learn to no one's surprise recent polls coming out of the mainstream media in the last few days have been a bit shady, to say the least. Every major poll studied by the New York Times conveniently has Hillary ahead of Donald Trump by huge margins, despite such a high percentage of voters saying they could never trust Hillary. It seems polling companies are changing their formulas they have in order to show Hillary is ahead. And there are cases that are documented where that was very explicit. We have just completed our own poll since we called 1,000 homes in each of the 50 states and asked basic questions on the economy, terrorism, immigration, and who a person's presidential pick was. The economy was the #1 factor Americans are concerned about, terrorism #2. Our poll consisted of 1,000 calls per state to all 50 states, or 50,000 people total included in this poll, which is quite a hefty sample. It took us almost 2 weeks to be sure our calls were to all people, not just one party or another. Our poll was conducted by taking registered voter lists. We broke them down into 33% Republican, 33% Democrats, and 34% independents. The presidential race poll numbers broke down as followed, with Trump ahead by a large percentage. Trump, 33,478 votes, or 67%. Clinton, 9,788 votes, or 19%. Undecided or other, 639 votes, or 13%.
Huge.
Brian, I have one poll after another showing exactly this kind of split, that Trump had a massive lead. So what were they doing? Well, among other things, Hillary was drawing very poor turnouts. Only 171 people, for example, turned out for a rally she conducted in St. Petersburg, Florida. So they photoshopped the image to make it look as though there was a massive crowd. A couple of hundred people showed up. Door count put the number at 171 within a St. Petersburg venue capable of holding in excess of 4,000 without seating. So they photoshopped. The media's effort to artificially inflate the size of Hillary's crowds is noteworthy, given that Donald Trump has consistently accused the press of refusing to show the huge attendance at his own rallies. So this was even while Hillary was drawing 171 in St. Petersburg, Trump was drawing 30,000 or more in Boca Raton. I mean, it was completely outrageous. Now, in anticipation of the election, even Michael Moore was offering a very pessimistic assessment. I'm sorry to have to be the buzzkill here so early on, but I think Trump is going to win. I'm sorry, said Moore as the audience audibly groaned. The enemy is complacency, responded Mayer. This was on with Bill Mayer. Say it every day, he certainly could win. Moore went on to explain that Trump was following a Brexit strategy by appealing to middle America. He was much more specific, Brian. He said that Hillary would lose because she was ignoring the Rust Belt states of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Indeed, as a resident here in Wisconsin, she didn't visit Wisconsin even once.
Yeah.
It turned out now that Jill Stein asked for a recount, and the results were rather stunning. That she asked for a recount in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, which were the three key states. They couldn't do a recount in Pennsylvania because they use so many touchscreen voting machines, which don't even keep a record. To me, that means they are on their face unconstitutional. How can anyone contest an election they've lost when you can't even retrieve the data necessary to support the appeal? When they redid the vote in Wisconsin, Trump picked up 100, I think in the end, 171 votes. Here it's reporting 139. We have paper ballots in Wisconsin, but optical scans counting to improve the efficiency of the counting. But obviously the vote in Wisconsin was very clean. But in Michigan, massive voter fraud by Hillary Clinton. Precincts that voted 95% for Hillary found to have vast numbers of ballots added after the polls had closed. This is absolutely stunning. Large numbers of precincts in Michigan, which voted overwhelmingly for Hillary, may be disqualified from the presidential election recount that began Monday because of indications of fraud. Wayne County, with over 1.7 million residents, voted overwhelmingly for former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. She won 95% of the vote. But 1/3 of its precincts could now be disqualified from the recount because of discrepancies between the recorded number of votes cast and the actual number of votes counted.
This reminds me of Lyndon Johnson.
Well, this is much more massively. She makes Lyndon Johnson look like an amateur, Brian, a rank amateur. This is completely outrageous. Just think about how the legitimate poll of 50,000 voters showed Trump had a lead of like 67% to Hillary with maybe 23 versus this outcome. Even Elizabeth Warren was moved to observe the 2016 Democratic nomination was rigged for Hillary Clinton, and we know much, much, much more was going on within the DNC to guarantee that Hillary would be the Democratic nominee, including the sabotage of the campaign of Bernie Sanders, about which we will have more later. And get this now, a scientific study by faculty at the Boston University and the University of Minnesota concluded that the reason that Trump prevailed over Hillary was that voters in rural counties, in particular in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, which had suffered high casualties in the Middle East war, voted for Trump, not with certainty, but in the belief that he was the less likely of the two candidates to continue those wars. That was the difference in the election. It had nothing to do with any other consideration, notwithstanding the Democrats' vast efforts to obfuscate that fact, to which I am about to turn. But let me assure you, Michael Moore had it right. Hillary Clinton blew the election. She didn't even come, as I've already observed, to Wisconsin. She neglected the Rust Belt states. That cost her the election. Hillary's health was a background issue, Brian. This is really fascinating. On September 3rd, 2016, at 8:57 p.m., Huma Abedin, who is Hillary's closest personal aide and with whom she's involved on many different levels, writing to her brother, "Sorry for my late reply, Hassan. Yes, let me tell you about her. The woman is so odd, so starved for validation, so tormented and vain. It is a constant surprise to me anyone takes her seriously. Everyone on the team knows how unwell she is, but they're more determined than ever to see her win. This woman who has a dozen seizures a day, this godless, shrieking malcontent passed out in her medical van, this walking cadaver. She's non-functional, Hassan. Nobody cares. We sober her up for speeches and indulge the press corps with cheap sentiment. Their first female president, the last glass ceiling, etc. They trip over themselves, lining up behind her. Surely they know it's not her they're getting. It's the one in the corner, the quiet helper, your sister Huma. You asked me once how I did it. How did I take the castle? Hassan, I didn't take it. They gave it to me. Yes, there was a cost, I will admit. Subjecting myself to men like AGW, that's going to be Anthony Weiner, to whom she was married, and WJC, William Jefferson Clinton, is mortal torture. But I do it gladly, brother. Everything they ask of me, however sick and depraved, I do it, and I smile rejoicing at the thought of those whose glory I serve. Now get this, wow. We all know about how Hillary lost her balance at the 9/11 memorial and was virtually thrown into this glorified SUV, which is actually an ambulance masquerading as a vehicle. They sent out a body double. They were so troubled that concerns about her health were going to skyrocket. Hillary had been wearing the clothing on the left. They sent out the double on the right. Here she is. We can all breathe a sigh of relief. Hillary's body double is in good health. I reported this at the time. Even The Hill, which is a publication for those who work on Capitol Hill, picked up the story and talked about it, seeking to dismiss it, but it wouldn't go away. In fact, within a couple of days, they had a second body double. You can see her on the right. The first double looked to me, reminded me so much of the actress, one of my favorites, that I referred to her as the Meg Ryan double. She was much lighter, much younger, much more spry, remarkably enough, very friendly, very casual, unlike Hillary Clinton, with no Secret Service surrounding her. That ought to have been an obvious clue. The second double, which was on the plane on a flight to Greensboro, North Carolina, has a more sloping forehead, is also younger, but much more resembles another actress of esteem, Meryl Streep. So I refer to her as the Meryl Streep double. But Hillary's use of doubles went on even during the campaign. You see Hillary on the left, you see the body double actually during the national debates. This is stunning, Brian. Stunning. Anyone who paid attention would recognize that is not Hillary Clinton.
Well, it's hard to believe it's such a match. It is incredible, though.
And they had a voice box, which gives her voice the same tonal qualities as Hillary's inside her mouth. You could see it on occasion in some of the video footage. Here's another during the debates. You see the real Hillary on the left. You see this younger, thinner, far more healthy candidate. They couldn't afford to put Hillary out there because the real deal looks like a walking cadaver, just as Huma Abedin explained. Believe me, no U.S. television would go with this story, but they ran a special about Hillary Clinton's use of body doubles on Russian television after I reached out to them with what I had.
But how do they do that? How do they find someone so exact? It's incredible. It's hard to believe.
Well, it's not. They have lots of choices, Brian. They can do cosmetic surgery. There are all kinds of options. Yeah, I've done a whole thing about body doubles, which you can find online. It's called fake news, issues of identity. You can find it 153news.net. Everyone ought to watch it. I go through it much more extensively, Hillary's use of body doubles, and documented in spades. Okay. Here's another fake Hillary Clinton visiting the troops in the Middle East, in Afghanistan. I mean, that is not Hillary Clinton. Even the New York Times ran a story. This is already February 2017. Hillary's in the house. The reporter, Michael Paulson, was explaining that she had gone to 4 different Broadway plays, and she had photographs of Hillary at each of the 4 plays. And Brian, I wrote to Michael Paulson saying that was a very interesting article, but none of those were Hillary Clinton. None of those were Hillary Clinton. He didn't even mention she wasn't surrounded by Secret Service. Hillary goes nowhere without her Secret Service. She even has a medical handler, a big black guy who has multiple degrees in neurology.
Good point.
Who's at her side regularly. She wasn't there. Paulson, instead of setting the record straight, and this is indicative of the corrupt status of the New York Times, which I refer now as the Langley newsletter, because it's completely under the control of the CIA, never even bothered to reply. Now here we get elements of the Russian collusion story. This was a new insider book. This is written by 2 investigative journalists. It was entitled Shattered: Inside Hillary Clinton's Doom Campaign, published in early 2017. How they made up the Russia story to cover up a lazy, pathetic election loss. This is from the book itself. On a phone call with a longtime friend a couple of days after the election, Hillary was much less accepting of her defeat. She put a fine point on the factor she believed cost her the presidency. The FBI, Comey, the KGB, the old name for Russia's intelligence service, and the KKK, the support Trump got from white nationalists. I'm angry, Hillary told her friend, and exhausted. After 2 brutal campaigns against Sanders and Trump, Hillary now had to explain the failure to friends in a seemingly endless round of phone calls. That was taking a call on her already weary and grief-stricken soul, but mostly she was mad she'd lost and the country would have to endure a Trump presidency. Well, within 48 hours of Hillary's concession speech, Robbie Mook and John Podesta put out the report that there had been Russian interference in the election, and that was the principal reason why Hillary had lost. This was just making public a story they believed would then be subsequently corroborated by investigations by the FBI and the Department of Justice, knowing they were already at work because they'd been doing this, as Christopher Steele acknowledged, in the payment of Hillary Clinton and as representatives of the Democratic Party. Here we have now when Anthony Weiner's laptop was taken into custody by the NYPD. This is from Zero Hedge. Yesterday, the FBI has found tens of thousands of emails belonging to Huma Abedin on Anthony Weiner's computer, raising questions how practical it is that any conclusive finding will be available or made by the FBI in the few days left before the election. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, it appears that federal agents were preparing to scour roughly 650,000 emails that, as we reported moments ago, were discovered on the laptop of Anthony Weiner. to see how many relate to a prior probe of her email use. As metadata on the device suggests, there may be thousands sent to her from the private server that the Democratic nominee used while she was Secretary of State. The review will take weeks at a minimum to determine whether those messages are work-related between Huma Abedin, a close Clinton aide, and the estranged wife of Mr. Weiner, and State Department officials, how many are duplicates of emails already reviewed, and whether they include classified information or important new evidence. In fact, it was an absolute treasure trove. And when James Comey testified after they took access of these emails that they showed no improprieties by Hillary Clinton, he had not even bothered to review them, Brian. James Comey is as corrupt as they get. Here are some reports coming out at the time. Greg Hillard, sources within the NYPD tell me this is way bigger than people know. Emails point to a pedophile ring with Hillary Clinton at the center. I would not report this unless I was 100% sure. Known this source over 15 years. Carmen Katz, my NYPD source, says it's much more vile and serious than classified material on Weiner's device. The email detailed the trips made by Weiner, Bill, and Hillary on their pedophile billionaire friend's plane, the Lolita Express. Yup, Hillary has a well-documented predilection for underage girls, and Mr. Weiner just could not bear to see those details deleted. We're talking an international child enslavement and sex ring. Not even Hillary's most ardent supporters and defenders will be able to excuse this.
Wow, that's incredible.
And here's another story about it. Breaking bombshell, NYPD blows whistle on new Hillary emails. Money laundering, sex crimes with children, child exploitation, pay-to-play, perjury. New York Police Department detectives and prosecutors working an alleged underage sexting case against former Congressman Anthony Weiner have turned over a newly found laptop he shared with wife Huma Abedin to the FBI with enough evidence, quote, to put Hillary Clinton and her crew away for life, NYPD sources told True Pundit. Seymour Hersh also documented other exploits by Hillary Clinton she wanted concealed, to wit, that she sold nerve gas to Syrian terrorists to use them as an excuse to invade Syria. Respected investigative journalist Seymour Hersh has claimed Hillary Clinton sold nerve gas to Syrian terrorists while she was acting as Secretary of State. Hersh claimed the Obama administration falsely blamed the government of Syria's Bashar al-Assad for the sarin gas attack, which they were hoping to use as an excuse to invade Syria. Hersh also claims the Obama administration assisted in approving the transfer of deadly chemical weapons from Syria to terrorists who were operational in Syria. According to Zero Hedge, by the terms of the agreement, funding came from Turkey as well as Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The CIA, with the support of MI6, was responsible for getting arms from Gaddafi's arsenals into Syria. However, now, for the first time, Hersh has implicated Hillary Clinton directly in this rat line. It also appears to be the case that these aging women, Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi, believe they are rejuvenated by drinking the blood of children. I was first suspect that Nancy Pelosi might be involved when it turned out that the elector from California who was leading the false defector, the elector defector program, encouraging the electors to not vote for the person they'd been selected to represent, was Nancy Pelosi's daughter. That led me to do some investigation, and I discovered immediately she actually owns her own pizzeria, Goat Hill Pizza, which features a goat head, which of course is a familiar satanic symbol.
Yeah.
And a follower actually visited and took photographs from inside. And unlike any other pizzeria I've ever seen, this one is just covered on the walls with drawings by little children. And you have several men waiting there, not, I believe, for their sausage and pepperoni, but for something a bit more salacious. This is absolutely incredible stuff. It explains to a large degree why Nancy Pelosi is so dedicated to sabotaging Donald Trump. Even John Podesta, who turns out, based upon my investigation, to be the pedophile in chief, has been calling the Seth Rich investigators despicable, claims he can't sleep since Hillary lost. He's worried because the revelations published by WikiLeaks lead directly to Pizzagate, where he plays this central role. We now have government document bearing Hillary's signature approving the U.S.-Russia Federation uranium deal, just like IntelliHub's Shepard and Bellis reported back in January of 2016. Hillary Clinton sold 20% of U.S. uranium to the Russians, and here's the proof. In fact, it's been widely discussed, for example, on Hannity, Fox News, but you won't hear this on the mainstream. What this means, Brian, is the reason they sought to introduce the Russian hoax was to distract attention from the incompetent campaign they'd run by neglecting, in particular, the Rust Belt states of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Number two, to divert attention from the contents of the WikiLeaks revelations, which led directly to Pizzagate, where John Podesta himself, as I mentioned, appears to be pedophile in chief. And third, to draw attention away from Hillary Clinton's own involvements with Russia, where as Secretary of State, she sold off 20% of U.S. uranium reserves to Russia through a Canadian company, Uranium One, for a $145 million bribe with the approval of Barack Obama. And I observed, Brian, that if Julius and Ethel Rosenberg received the electric chair for sharing U.S. atomic secrets with the then Soviet Union, what do Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama deserve for selling 20% of U.S. uranium reserves to Russia?
Yeah.
Now, here we get into the true story of the DNC email hack. The fact of the matter is it wasn't a hack at all. In fact, Kim.com, who's a familiar internet personality, has acknowledged that he assisted Seth Rich, who was an IT guy for the DNC. He was a Bernie Sanders supporter. Seth Rich was disillusioned by the DNC sabotaging Bernie's campaign, where Debbie Wasserman Schultz transferred 13 primary victories won by Bernie Sanders to Hillary Clinton's column to guarantee that she would be the nominee of the Democratic Party. Assange himself has hinted that the Russians weren't the leak of the Democratic Party emails he published, that it actually came from inside the Democratic Party itself. There's a question here, since Assange might wind up testifying, that it could backfire on the Democrats when it's found that the leaker was a disgruntled anti-Hillary Clinton Democrat who was mysteriously murdered. The family of Seth Rich has confirmed he transmitted the DNC emails to WikiLeaks. We've been waiting a long time to hear this. The family of Seth Rich has admitted they knew what Seth did. Ed Butowski, the kind man who assisted them as a private investigator, has come forward to say in a December 2016 conversation with Seth's father, Joel Rich, he admitted he knew what his son did. It's shocking to know that Joel and Mary Rich kept this to themselves all this time, but I cannot imagine how long it's taken them to process this knowledge. I wonder what Aaron Rich is saying. Unfortunately, Joel and Mary have been brainwashed by the left so badly they worried their son would be remembered for helping to get President Donald Trump elected. We must pray they open their eyes soon to understand their son is an American hero. Now, he was shot on the street, and it appears to be at the direction of John Podesta, who let it be known that he wanted to set an example of a leaker, and he didn't even care if the evidence wasn't conclusive that he'd actually been leaking. This is from a fourth-year residence at Washington Hospital Center, where Seth was taken after having been shot. Get this. Seth Rich was shot twice with 3 total gunshot wounds, entry and exit and entry. He was taken to the OR emergently, where we performed an X-lap and found a small injury to segment 3 of the liver, which was packed with several small bowel injuries, pretty common for gunshots to the back exiting the abdomen, which we resected about 12 centimeters of bowel and left him in discontinuity, didn't hook back everything out, with the intent of performing a washout in the morning. He did not have any vascular injuries otherwise. I've seen dozens of worse cases than this which survived, and nothing about his injuries suggested to me that he'd sustained a fatal wound. In the meanwhile, he was transferred to the ICU and transfused 2 units of blood when his post-surgery crit came back at about 20. He was stable, not on any pressors, and it seemed pretty routine. About 8 hours after he arrived, we were swarmed by LEOs, law enforcement officers, and pretty much everything except for the attending and a few nurses was kicked out. Everyone was kicked out of the ICU, disallowing visiting hours, normally every odd hour, for example, 1 a.m., 3 a.m., and so forth, not something we do routinely. It was weird as hell. At turnover that morning, we were instructed not to round on the VIP who came in last night. That's exactly what the attending said, and no one except for me and another resident had any idea who he was talking about. No one here was allowed to see Seth except for my attending when he died. No code was called. I rounded on patients literally next door, but was physically blocked from checking in on him. I've never seen anything like it before. And while I can't say 100% that he was allowed to die, I don't understand why he was treated like this. Take it how you may, I'm just one low-level doc. Something's fishy, though, that's for sure. Well, I can assure you 100% that Seth Rich was not just allowed to die, but induced to die under circumstances where that ought not to have taken place.
Wow, that's shocking. Wow.
Now, veteran intelligence professionals for sanity have confirmed that their forensic studies of the Russian hacking into the DNC computers last year revealed that on July 5th, 2016, data was leaked, not hacked, by a person with physical access to DNC computers. After examining metadata from the Guccifer 2.0 July 5th, 2016 intrusion into the DNC server, independent cyber investigators have concluded that an insider copied DNC data onto an external storage device. Additionally, the former Intel operatives detail how the FBI neglected to perform any independent forensics on the original Guccifer 2.0 and assert the reason the U.S. government lacks conclusive evidence of a transfer to a Russian hack to WikiLeaks is because there was no such transfer. Among those who signed on to the report is William Benny, former NSA Technical Director for World Geopolitical and Military Analysis, co-founder of NSA Signals Intelligence Automation Research Center, Larry C. Johnson, who's retired from the CIA and State Department, Kirk Weaver, former senior analyst at SIGINT Automation Research Center for the NSA, and many more. Although Assange has previously expressed interest in Rich, he's always maintained that WikiLeaks will never name a source. WikiLeaks has, however, offered a $20,000 reward for Rich's murder and has retweeted articles that assert he was their source without providing any additional comment. Let me affirm, by the way, I featured Bill Binney on my own show, The Raw Deal, and he confirmed directly to me that this had been a direct download at the DNC. It was done in the Eastern time zone much too rapidly to have been distant Russian hacking. And as you may well know, the DNC would not allow the FBI to have access to their servers. What could be more conspicuous evidence that this was all fabrication? We have a UK diplomat. I've met the DNC WikiLeaks leaker, and the person is an insider, not Russian. In early November, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange told reporter Jot Pilger in an exclusive interview it wasn't Russia who hacked into the DNC and Clinton staff emails. We now have further confirmation from a former intelligence analyst, British ambassador to Uzbekistan, and chancellor of the University of Dundee, Craig Murray, who wrote yesterday, that would have been December 11th, 2016. As Julian Assange has made crystal clear, the leaks did not come from the Russians. As I've explained countless times, they are not hacks. They are insider leaks. There's a major difference between the two. I know who leaked them. I've met the person who leaked them, and they are certainly not Russian, and it's an insider. It's a leak, not a hack. The two are different things. In other words, Murray, a close friend of Julian Assange, says he knows for a fact there were no hacks at all. Instead, an American insider leaked the information to WikiLeaks. So Seth Rich, disillusioned that the DNC was sabotaging the campaign of Bernie Sanders, whom he supported, with the assistance of Kim.com, conducted a download to a memory device, a memory stick, right from the DNC servers in real time in the Eastern time zone, and then appears to have transferred the contents to Julian Assange by way of Craig Murray, who's here affirming that he had met the leaker. And here you have Loretta Lynch, actually blowing up the Russian hacking storyline by saying there was no technical interference in the election. Attorney General Loretta Lynch addressed the widespread Russian hacking narrative, saying, "We don't see the sort of tactical interference that I know people had concerns about." Lynch was asked about the impact Russian hackers may have had on the 2016 election. Counter to the prevailing news being peddled by Democrats and the liberal media, Lynch said there was little evidence the Russians had violated the integrity of the U.S. election system. The Department of Homeland Security was actively engaged in reaching out to every state to make sure they had access to every resource they needed to protect their state's electoral system, she explained. Unfortunately, we didn't see the sort of tactical interference I know people had concerns about in terms of the voting machines and the like. And you notice behind her is Barack Obama, who in the past have assured the American people that hacking the American electoral system was impossible because there isn't one national electoral system. There are 50 state systems, each of which is protected. Barack Obama said that. And yet later it would be in his interest of reversing the allegations. Here we have observations from Judge Napolitano. The CIA and FBI examined the exact same data that was produced for them by the NSA. The CIA analyst said the Russians are behind this. The FBI analyst said there's no evidence the Russians are behind this. We do know this was leaking. This was not hacking. Leaking is the unauthorized exposure of something to a person to whom it wasn't intended. Hacking is the altering of an operational system. You can't affect the outcome of an election if you hack Clinton and the DNC. You can affect the outcome of election if you affect those who register the votes or count the votes. There is no evidence this was done by the Russians, but there is evidence for this. Who was harmed by Mrs. Clinton's extremely careless use of state secrets? Whose agents' lives were jeopardized by her failure to keep these state secrets? The American intelligence community. It's more likely than not that members of the American intelligence community leaked this to Julian Assange than that the Russians did. The suggestion comes from members of the intel community. And remember, the CIA and the FBI were deeply involved in this whole move against Trump. So, of course, they're going to claim the Russians did it, even though they know better.
Of course, yeah.
Here we have John Bolton, whom I regard as an extreme neocon and a very bad choice for national security advisor, but in this instance, speaking the truth. Bolton suggests Russian election hacks were false flagged by Obama administration. John Bolton, a former UN ambassador, reportedly considered for Deputy Secretary of State, said Sunday, and this was on December 12th of 2016, reports of Russian interference in the presidential election may be a false flag conjured up by the Obama administration. In an interview with Eric Shaw, Fox News, Bolton claimed the Obama administration had politicized intelligence, suggested there may have been a hidden motive behind the CIA's finding that Russians hacked computer networks belonging to the Democratic and Republican national committees. He questioned why the FBI did not uncover similar evidence of meddling by foreign intelligence services when it investigated Hillary Clinton's private email server. Here we have another Democratic fail. 71% of Americans don't believe Russia hacked the election. This was quite significant. The Russia intervened in 2016 election to favor Trump conspiracy theory was a Democrat's last-ditch effort to subvert the election by convincing the Electoral College to vote Hillary Clinton for the presidency. Thankfully, instead of GOP electors going rogue by voting for Hillary, the faithless electors turned out to be Democrats who ditched Hillary. She actually lost more votes than Trump, which were 6, I think, a total for Hillary, only 2 for Trump. Now, a new Morning Consult Politico poll finds American people don't buy the Russia's boogeyman lie either. Get this. Reasons why Hillary lost, and she's been going through one after another. She began uneducated voters, racists, Russia, Comey, third parties, electoral college, alt-right, fact machines, fake news, Russia again. It's a complete disgrace. Will we ever see justice for Seth Rich? I think this is a very serious question. He was murdered by the DNC, apparently at the direction of John Podesta, to set an example for leakers, further confirming this wasn't Russian hacking, but came from inside the DNC. Many further revelations have come forward, Brian. Here we have FBI, Trump-Russia stories are bullshit. The FBI has announced that claims suggesting Donald Trump was in contact with Russian officials before the election are complete bullshit. Following reports that White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus asked the FBI to dispute allegations of Russian interference, senior administration officials insist that the FBI came to Priebus to express their contempt for the Trump-Russia allegations, which appear to have been invented by the Democrats. The officials told reporters that FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe came to Priebus during a one-on-one meeting on February 15th. This would be 2017. That a New York Times story on the subject was bullshit, according to White House pool report. CNN reported Thursday the FBI had refused a request from Priebus to publicly push back on the Times report about Trump aides being in communication with Russian officials. But this was their storyline, so they were sticking to it. 4chan claims to have fabricated anti-Trump report as a hoax. In a story that's getting more surreal by the minute, a post on 4chan now claims the infamous golden shower scene in the unverified 35-page dossier, allegedly compiled by a British intelligence officer, was a hoax and fabricated by a member of the chat board as fan fiction, then sent to Rick Wilson, who proceeded to send it to the CIA, which then put it in their official classified intelligence report on the election. So here's a recap of what happened. This guy mailed the fan fiction to an anti-Trump pundit, Rick Wilson, about Trump making people pee on a bed Obama slept in. He thought it was real, gave it to the CIA. The CIA of the United States of America put this in their official classified intel report on Russian involvement in the election. Donald Trump and Obama both read this fan fiction. The CIA concluded the Russian planned to blackmail Trump with a story we just made up. Let that sink in. What have we become? Trump says Clapper admitted to him Russian report is made up, phony facts. This is from January 13, 2017. BuzzFeed faced ridicule and biting criticism after publishing a flimsy and unsubstantiated dossier linking President-elect Donald Trump with the Russian government and cataloging putatively lewd behavior without any solid evidence or investigation of the startling accusations. Now it appears the decision may be even foolhardy than it first seemed, as Trump wrote in a tweet Thursday. James Clapper called me yesterday to denounce the false and fictitious report that was illegally circulated, made up, phony facts. Too bad. Director of National Intelligence Dan Clapper did indeed discuss the contentious report with the president-elect on Wednesday and released a press statement, in essence, condemning the mainstream media's careless handling of unsubstantiated and sensitive information. The interviewer asked if Rich was one of WikiLeaks sources. This was of Julian Assange now. This slide actually ought to have occurred with the last set, but here it is. We don't comment on who our sources are. We have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States and that our sources face serious risk. That's why they come to us, so we can protect their anonymity. We're investigating to understand what happened in that situation with Seth Rich. I think it's a concerning situation. There's not a conclusion yet, but we are concerned about it. More importantly, a variety of WikiLeaks sources are concerned when that kind of things happen, alluding, of course, to his being shot. And here is Tucker Carlson reporting. This is on March 3rd, 2018 on government slaves. New poll: Americans don't care about Russia. What is the most important issue that will affect your vote for Congress? This is approaching in relation to the midterms. Immigration, border security, 12%. Gun control, Second Amendment, 12%. Taxes, fees, 10%. Jobs, economy, 9%. Russia, election meddling, 1%. That's even without knowing the full story. Now, yeah. Mark Levin has done a rather extensive review of Obama's police state tactics, suggesting his actions, rather than conspiracy theories about alleged Russian interference, to help Trump, what should be a target of congressional investigation, drawing on sources including the New York Times and the Washington Post. He described the case against Obama so far based on what is already publicly known. I believe he's got it exactly right. Here's a timeline. June 2016 FISA request. The Obama administration files a request with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to monitor communications involving Trump and several advisors. The request uncharacteristically is denied. July, Russia joke. WikiLeaks releases emails from Democratic National Committee to show an effort to prevent Senator Bernie Sanders from winning the presidential nomination. In a press conference, Donald Trump refers to Hillary Clinton's own missing emails, joking. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. That remark becomes a basis for accusation by Clinton and the media that Trump invited further hacking. This is as absurd as it gets, Brian. October, Podesta emails. In October, WikiLeaks releases the emails of Clinton campaign chair John Podesta, rolling out batches every day until the election created new mini scandals. The Clinton campaign blames Trump and the Russians. October, FISA request. The Obama administration submits a new narrow request to the FISA court, now focused on a computer server in Trump Tower, suspected of links to Russian banks. No evidence is found, but the wiretaps continue ostensibly for national security reasons. Andrew McCarthy at National Review later notes, the Obama administration is now monitoring an opposing presidential campaign using the high-tech surveillance powers of the Federal Intelligence Services. January 2017, BuzzFeed CNN dossier. BuzzFeed releases and CNN reports a supposed intelligence dossier compiled by a former foreign spy. It purports to show continuous contact between Russia and Trump campaign, says the Russians have compromising information about Trump. None of the allegations can be verified. Some are proven false. Several media outlets claim they had been aware of the dossier for months and that it had been circulating in Washington. This, of course, is the very dossier that Christopher Steele in a British court dumbfounded the judge by announcing he'd published it under the payment of Hillary Clinton. January, Obama expands NSA sharing. As Michael Walsh later notes, and as the New York Times reports, the outgoing Obama administration expanded the power of the NSA to share globally intercepted personal communications with the government's 16 other intel agencies before applying privacy protection. The new powers and reduced protection would make it easier for intelligence on private citizens to be circulated improperly or leaked.
That's terrible.
Isn't that a disgrace? This is Barack Obama,
Yeah.
whom the Democrats continue to laud as the greatest president ever. January, Times report. The New York Times reports on the eve of Inauguration Day that several agencies, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and the Treasury Department, are monitoring several associates of the Trump campaign suspected of Russian ties. Other news outlets also report the existence of a multi-agency working group to coordinate investigations across the government, though it's unclear how they found out, since the investigations would have been secret and involved classified information. February, Mike Flynn scandal. Reports emerged that the FBI intercepted conversation in 2016 between future NSA advisor, National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, then a private citizen, and Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. The intercept supposedly was a part of routine spying on the ambassador, not monitoring of the Trump campaign. The FBI transcripts reportedly show the two discussing Obama's newly imposed sanctions on Russia, though Flynn earlier denied discussing them. Sally Yates, whom Trump would later fire as acting attorney general for insubordination, is involved in the investigation. In the end, Flynn resigns over having misled Vice President Mike Pence, perhaps inadvertently, about the content of the conversation. February, Times claims extensive Russian contacts. The New York Times cites 4 current and former American officials in reporting that the Trump campaign had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials. The Trump campaign denies the claims, and the Times admits there is no evidence of coordination between the campaign and the Russians. The White House and some congressional Republicans begin to raise questions about illegal intelligence leaks. 10, the Washington Post targets Jeff Sessions. The Washington Post reports that Attorney General Jeff Sessions had contact twice with a Russian ambassador during the campaign, one at a Heritage Foundation event and once at a meeting in Sessions' Senate office. The Post suggests the 2 meetings contradict Sessions' testimony as confirmation hearings. He had no contacts with the Russians, although in contacts not presented by the Post, it was clear he met in his capacity as a campaign surrogate, in that he was responding to claims in the dossier of ongoing contacts. The New York Times, in covering the story, adds that the Obama White House rushed to preserve intelligence related to alleged Russian links with the Trump campaign. By preserve, it really meant disseminate. Officials spread evidence throughout the government agencies to leave a clear trail of intelligence for government investigators, and perhaps, I'd say no doubt, the media as well. In summary, the Obama administration sought and eventually obtained authorization to eavesdrop on the Trump campaign, continued monitoring the Trump team even when no evidence of wrongdoing was found, then relaxed the NSA rules to allow evidence to be shared widely within the government, virtually ensuring the information, including the conversation to private citizens, would be leaked to the media. Levin calls the effort a silent coup by the Obama administration and demanded it be investigated. In addition, he castigated Republicans in Congress for focusing their attention on Trump and Attorney General Sessions rather than Obama, the CIA, and the FBI for their corrupt acts. Here we have in a flashback, the New York Times admitted that wiretaps had been used against Trump. They specifically referred to Trump wiretaps. The New York Times already admitted wiretaps were used against the Trump campaign, despite now claiming there's no evidence of the wiretapping accusations President Trump launched against the former Obama administration on Saturday. And they actually had the headline there, Brian. Here are more WikiLeaks revelations. Newsleak confirmed CIA posed as Russian hackers. We'll keep this short and sweet. All allegations of digital fingerprints left behind by Russian hackers must now be dismissed as either fake or meaningless. It turns out the CIA had developed a technique to leave the indications that it had come from any source they want, including Russian. Here we have Vault 7. WikiLeaks starts a new series of leaks about the CIA. WikiLeaks has announced the start of a new series of leaks on the Central Intelligence Agency called Vault 7. Their largest ever publication of confidential CIA documents. Another Snowden emerges. WikiLeaks has published what it claims is the largest ever release of confidential documents by the CIA, including more than 80,000 documents. As part of Vault 7, a series of leaks on the agency which have allegedly emerged from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence in Langley and can be seen on the org chart below, which WikiLeaks also released. Another profound revelation is the CIA can engage in false cyber attacks which portray Russia as the assailant. Discussing the CIA's remote device branches umbrage group, WikiLeaks notes it collects and maintains a substantial library of attack techniques stolen from malware produced in other states, including the Russian Federation. With umbrage and related projects, CIA can not only increase its total number of attack types, but also misdirect attribution by leaving behind the fingerprints of the groups the attack techniques were stolen from. Umbrage components cover keyloggers, password collection, webcam capture, data destruction, persistence, privilege escalation, stealth, antivirus avoidance, and survey techniques. As Kim.com summarizes this finding, CIA uses techniques to make cyber attacks look like they originated from enemy state. It turns DNC Russia hack allegation by CIA into a joke. We also have further observation. Obama accused Russia of cyber attacks while his CIA turned all internet-enabled consumer electronics in Russia into listening devices. Wow. Julian Assange has been making the releases. Here are key releases from the Vault 7 so far. Year 0 introduces the scope and direction of the CIA's global covert hacking program, its malware arsenal, and dozens of zero-day weaponized exploits against a wide range of U.S. and European company products, including Apple's iPhone, Google's Android and Microsoft Windows, and even Samsung TVs, which are turned into covert microphones. WikiLeaks claims that the CIA lost control of the majority of its hacking arsenal, including malware, viruses, Trojans, weaponized zero-day exploits, malware, remote control systems, and associated documentation. This extraordinary collection, which amounts to more than several 100 million lines of code, gives its possessor the entire hacking capacity of the CIA. The archive appears to have been circulated among former U.S. government hackers and contractors in an unauthorized manner, one of whom has provided WikiLeaks with portions of the archive. By the end of 2016, the CIA's hacking division, which normally falls under the agency's Center for Cyber Intelligence, had over 5,000 registered users and had produced more than 1,000 hacking systems, Trojans, viruses, and other weaponized malware. Such is the scale of the CIA's undertaking that by 2016, its hackers had utilized more code than that used to run Facebook. The CIA's had created, in effect, its own NSA with even less accountability and without publicly answering the question as to whether such a massive budgetary spend on duplicating the capacities of a rival agency could be justified. Once a single cyber weapon is loose, it can spread around the world in seconds to be used by rival states, cyber mafia, and teenage hackers alike. And as we've noted, Obama expanded the NSA's powers before leaving so they could be used to sabotage Trump. After Trump won the election, Obama quietly expanded the NSA's ability to spy on innocent Americans just days before leaving office. This is completely outrageous. See now the deep state, including the NSA and FBI, appear to be leaking all of Trump's private phone calls with foreign leaders and took down General Michael Evans by spying on his calls and leaking them to their friends at the Washington Post and the New York Times. The story is being looked at in a completely new light. As the New York Times reported on January 12th of 2017, in its final days, the Obama administration has expanded the power of the National Security Agency to share globally intercepted personal communication with the government's 1,600 intel agencies before applying to privacy protection. This obviously violates all kinds of constraints. And
scandalous. Yeah.
And Brian, the beat goes on. Here's the FBI's FISA memo released. Here's what it says. The just released FISA memo that was used to justify spying on Trump accuses senior officials at the DOJ of inappropriately using biased opposition research into then candidate Trump to obtain surveillance warrants on transition team members as part of the federal investigation into the Trump campaign in Russia. According to the document, information from the so-called Steele dossier was essential to the acquisition of surveillance warrants on Trump campaign aide Carter Page. It claims then Deputy Director Andrew McCabe told the committee in December, without the information from the Steele dossier, no surveillance warrant for Page would have been sought. The memo alleges the political origins of the dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC were not disclosed to the clandestine court that signed off on the warrant request. Here we have 16 bombshells in the Nunes memo the media don't want you to know, because this is where Devin Nunes in the House did a very thorough job of investigating. Here, one, the so-called Russian dossier, the creation of Fusion GPS and former British spy Christopher Steele, is a political document, namely opposition research created for the DNC and Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. You see what it knew was opposition research paid for by the Clinton campaign. In October of 2016, the FBI and DOJ obtained a FISA warrant from the Secret Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to install a wiretap to spy on Hillary Clinton's opponent, the Trump campaign, specifically Carter Page. This spying would last for a year. 3, it should be noted the FISA court was set up to stop foreign terrorists. The fact the FBI and DOJ would use this court to not only wiretap an American, but to monitor a presidential campaign defies belief. Why Obama's FBI and DOJ use this court as opposed to a normal court is obvious. As you will see below, a normal court probably would have denied the application for. We're still in the summer of 2016. Obama's DOJ had already opened a counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign. The fact that nothing from that month's own partisan investigation was used to obtain the Page wiretap is revealing. 5, according to the Nunes memo, an essential part of the FISA application was a Steele dossier, which again is a partisan political document created for the Clinton campaign. 6, so essential was this partisan dossier, Andrew McCabe, the disgraced former deputy director of the FBI, admitted in December no surveillance warrant would have been sought without the dossier. 7, not only did the FBI knowingly use a document from a partisan campaign to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on the competing campaign, the FBI knew the dossier was mostly salacious and unverified. We know this because disgraced former FBI Director James Comey told us so in June of 2017. 8, according to the Nunes memo, Steele told demoted DOJ official Bruce Orr He was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected. It was passionate about him not being president. 9. Or, who was part of the FBI's anti-Trump Russia investigation, was not only friendly with Steele, Orr's own wife, Nellie, worked at Fusion GPS doing opposition research, the dossier against Trump for the Clinton campaign. 10. Despite A, knowing the dossier was opposition research paid by the Clinton campaign. B, knowing the dossier was salacious and unverified. C, knowing Steele was desperate to destroy Trump. D, the breathtaking conflict of interest in having an investigator's own wife working on the dossier. The FBI still went to the FISA court to obtain permission to spy on Hillary Clinton's opponent. 11. In order to obtain a warrant to spy on a Trump campaign, all of the conflicts of interest above were withheld from the FISA court. An indefensible and possibly illegal lie of omission. 12. Even worse. In order to legitimize a warrant request based on a piece of partisan research opposition they knew was salacious and unverified, the FBI and DOJ used a media report to bolster the findings in the phony dossier. The FBI and DOJ told the court that the media report was independent verification of the dossier, but this was not true. And according to the Nunes memo, the FBI and the DOJ knew this was not true. The truth is the phony dossier was the source of this media report. 13. Also hidden from the FISA court was the fact that the FBI obtained Steele as a source, but had to fire him in October of 2016 when, in a bid to use his phony dossier to derail the Trump campaign, he leaked his information to the far left, Mother Jones. 14. Although the FBI and DOJ were willing participants in pushing a salacious and unverified narrative against a presidential candidate, primarily through media leaks, this was all hidden from congressional investigators. To begin with, for months, while under oath, Comey said he did not know where the dossier came from, meaning from the Clinton campaign. The Wall Street Journal explains, quote, "We also know the FBI wasn't straight with Congress, as it hid most of these facts from investigators in a briefing on the dossier in January of 2017. The FBI did not tell Congress about Mr. Steele's connection to the Clinton campaign, and the House had to issue subpoenas for Fusion Bank records to discover the truth. Nor did the FBI tell investigators that it continued receiving information from Mr. Steele and Fusion even after it had terminated him." The memo says the Bureau's intermediary was Justice Department official Bruce Orr, whose wife, incredibly, worked for Fusion. 15. All of this dishonesty occurred under Comey, the man our media is now holding up as a living saint, a man so desperate to destroy Trump. He not only oversaw some of those committing the above abuses, he leaked potentially classified information to the news media in order to see a special prosecutor appointed against Trump, which his pal, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, immediately did. Adam Schiff, FISA memo could lead to firings of Mueller and Rosenstein. Stocks are red. Trade Gowdy is abruptly retiring from Congress. Everybody is laughing at what looks like droll drippings from the edge of Joe Kennedy's mouth during his rebuttal to last night's State of the Union. And along comes Reuters, dropping a bombshell headline that, if accurate, could shift the narrative of the multiple investigations involving Russian obstruction of justice. Reuters quoted Adam Schiff, the top Democrat on the House Intel Committee, who believes the contents of the 4-page memo about allegedly FBI abuses of FISA set for public release in the next several days could lead to the firing of special counsel Bob Mueller, or more likely Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein, and we can certainly see why that would be the case. All this, of course, was reinforced by the media onslaught. MSNBC has been particularly egregious. Here's Katie Tour, for example, one of 4 young women who are mainstays among their correspondents, who actually, I'm embarrassed to say, earned a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy from the University of California, Santa Barbara, where she learned to detect fallacies, and now in her role as a reporter is committing them egregiously. Here's a very interesting report going back to how the United States repealed the propaganda ban in order to spread government-made news to Americans. For decades, so-called anti-propaganda law prevented U.S. government's mammoth broadcasting arm from delivering programming to American audience. But on July 2nd, that was in 2013, but it was based on the the Smith Modernization Act of 2012, which preceded the Sandy Hook event, that came silently to an end with the implementation of a new reform passed in January. The result, an unleashing of thousands of hours per week of government-financed radio and TV programs. For decades, a so-called anti-propaganda law prevented the U.S. government from delivering programming to America, but that came to end with an unleashing of propaganda for domestic U.S. consumption in a reform initially criticized as a green light for U.S. domestic propaganda. So what happened? The restriction of these broadcasts was due to the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, a long-standing piece of legislation, been amended numerous times over the years, perhaps most consequentially by Arkansas Senator William Fulbright. In the 70s, Fulbright was no friend of Voice of America and Radio Free Europe and moved to restrict them from domestic distribution, saying they should be given the opportunity to take their rightful place in the graveyard of Cold War relics. Fulbright's amendment to the Smith-Mundt was bolstered in 1985 by Nebraska editor Edward Zorinsky, who argued that such propaganda should be kept out of America as to distinguish the U.S. from the Soviet Union, where domestic propaganda is a principal government activity. Zorinsky and Fulbright sold their amendments on sensible rhetoric. American taxpayers should be funding propaganda for American audiences. So did Congress just tear down the American public's last defense against domestic propaganda? If anyone needed a reminder of the dangers, the past 12 months provided ample reasons. Last year, 2 NSA Today journalists were ensnared in a propaganda campaign after reporting about millions of dollars in back taxes owed by the Pentagon's propaganda contractor in Afghanistan. Eventually, one of the co-owners of the firm confessed to creating phony websites and Twitter accounts to smear the journalists anonymously. Additionally, just this month, the Washington Post exposed a counter-propaganda program by the Pentagon that recommended posting comments on a U.S. website run by a Somali expat with readers opposing al-Shabaab. Today, the military is more focused on manipulating news and commentary on the internet, especially social media, by posting material and images without necessarily claiming ownership. So the U.S. has now banned domestic propaganda.
It's
being
fake
branded.
news.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, Brian, how Obama did this to us again.
Yeah, fake news.
This is another corruption of Barack Obama, giving the shaft to the American people and subverting the Constitution. It's being branded by proponents as an attempt at transparency, but critics of a new law say the United States government just got the green light to use propaganda made for foreign audiences on the American public. Until earlier this month, a long-standing federal law made it illegal for the U.S. Department of State to share domestically the internally authorized news stories sent to American operating broadcast around the globe. All that changed effective July 2nd, when the Broadcasting Board of Governors was given permission to let U.S. households tune in to hear the type of programming previously only allowed to outside nations. Here we have another report about it. Media meltdown. Conspiracy is no longer theory. At long last, yesterday saw the public declassification of the infamous memo authored by Republican Chairman of the House Intel Committee, Mevin Dumas. As the anticipation was building up over the past year, the Democratic Party, along with anti-Trump U.S. mainstream media, descended to a state of sheer panic, saying and trying anything in order to suppress the damning information in the document. But this is included since this the initial memorandum to modernize the Smith-Mundt Act in 2012 occurred. We've had Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing, 9/11, Orlando, Charlottesville, Las Vegas, Parkland. There's been an unending series of these staged phony attacks that are now perfectly legal. Definitive, and it's clear that a lot of the propaganda that's being put out here could be viewed as being subsumed within the scope here. There are two particularly important sections to note in this memo. The first states how the wife of Assistant Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr was also tracking dirt for dubious opposition research for the firm Fusion GPS. The second, how embattled FBI Director Andrew McCabe has signed off on the corrupt FISA proceedings. It was also angling for some insurance policy in the event Trump won. Texas Representative Louis Gohmert calls on Comey McCabe in order to be jailed after defrauding the FISA court with the fake Trump dossier. We can understand where that came from. U.S. Representative Louis Gohmert, Republican of Texas, himself a former judge, told the Daily Caller former FBI Director James Comey, former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, Justice Department official Bruce Orr should face prison for what they knew to be a political document to convince the FISA court to let them spy on the campaign of someone they decided should not be president. Here we have Jacob Wool tweeting, Randolph Contreras was a FISA judge who issued a warrant to spy on Carter Page because of a Yahoo News article in a phony dossier. Guess who appointed Contreras to the FISA court? Surprise, surprise, Barack Hussein Obama.
Yeah.
Here we have shifty proof of collusion surfacing, not about Trump, but about Adam Schiff. Get this is a brand new report, Brian. This is from February 7th, yesterday.
Yeah.
This is unethically priceless. John Sullivan received photographs of Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson meeting with House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff in 2018 during the height of the Spygate cover-up. Hill, when confronted with the Aspen conference photos of Schiff in sports coat and open neck dress shirt and Simpson wearing casual attire, representatives for both men try to minimize their discussion, insisting nothing substantial about the Russia case was discussed. In the summer of 2018, Mr. Simpson attended a media-sponsored social event where he exchanged small talk with Representative Schiff and many other people who were in attendance, Fusion GPS said in a statement to Well, Brian, the role of Robert J. Mueller is going to stagger much of the public because they have been given the impression that he's a knight in shining armor aboard a white horse.
Oh, yeah.
The fact of the matter is the FBI is a corrupt rogue agency with a history of extreme deceit and even terrorism against the American people. During a recent segment of Tucker Carlson Tonight, for example, he explained how the FBI has been rife with corruption and deceit, long engaged in anti-American tactics and behavior that serve the interest of an elite few rather than of the American people. It turns out that FBI Director Mueller came in before 9/11 and played a role in covering it up. Court documents recently filed with the government rock the credibility of Russia's special counsel Robert Mueller because they show as FBI director he worked to cover up connections between a Florida Saudi family and the 9/11 terrorist attack. They reveal he was likely involved in publicly releasing deceptive official agency statements about a secret investigation of the Saudis who lived in Sarasota with ties to the hijackers. A Florida journalism nonprofit uncovered the existence of these files. But there was a lot more to it than that. It turns out there's an untold story of Robert Mueller's time in combat. I have commented on it before when you get these praising stories. I wrote, what fatuous rubbish. This guy covered up 9/11, Sandy Hook, and the Boston bombing. Check out the 9/11 memoranda for the president, with contributions from 27 experts, which demonstrates the blatancy of the 9/11 scam where he did nothing to expose it. That's at Robert David Steele's website, or the egregious frauds of Sandy Hook and the Boston bombing, on which I have also published books with 13 and 15 contributors respectively at moonrockbooks.com. For an introduction to the fakery, see The Real Deal, Sandy Hook and the Boston bombing, for example, a video at 153news.net. Now we know they faked the kids using photographs of older kids when they were younger. For example, Sandy Hook imposters want Facebook's protection from exposure and prosecution for their criminal acts. Anyone who stills buy into the Russian collusion memo needs to read The Russian Hoax, 2018 by Greg Jarrett, which puts Robert Mueller at the core of FBI corruption. We need serious reporting, not propaganda from Wired, where I posted this comment. And of course, Brian, I've been so glad to do the two very substantial reviews of JFK and 9/11, which are available with you on BitChute.
Yeah. Also, we did Sandy Hook as well, and Las Vegas.
Yeah, absolutely sensational stuff, Brian.
Yeah, you did excellent slides on those. Very thorough. Thanks, Jim.
Here's another revelation profoundly disturbing. Former mobster FBI informant murdered in prison. Did he have the goods on Robert Mueller? Here we're talking about Boston mob boss James Whitey Bulger, 89, who was murdered by a fellow inmate with ties to the mafia in a West Virginia federal prison shortly after he was transferred there. According to one congressman, Mueller and those serving under him in the FBI aided Bulger in eliminating mob competitors, and recently Mueller turned over an alleged scheme to pay off women to fabricate sexual assault allegations against him to the FBI. Now get this, here's what was going on. It emerged in Bulger's 2013 trial. He'd served as an FBI informant as far back as 1975, though he always denied the claim. Law enforcement sources told Daily Mail that Whitey had been talking about outing people in the FBI, people in the top echelon of the informant program. The sources said he hadn't even been processed at the West Virginia facility when he was killed. But someone who knew he was being transferred put the word out. The killer had to know he was coming. According to Representative Louis Gohmert in a report entitled Robert Mueller Unmasked, he revealed not only the corruption of Bob Mueller we already know about, but his ties to Bulger and them working together to eliminate mob competition. Sound familiar? It was basically what was going on with Operation Fast and Furious, in which the Obama administration was arming Mexican drug cartels to eliminate cartel competition. This was with Eric Holder deeply involved. So Whitey Bulger was giving information to Robert Mueller, who was then U.S. attorney for Boston, so he could take out his mob competitors, so Mueller would get credit for cracking down on organized crime, and Whitey could expand his operation to the territory they'd formerly occupied. Here we have a mafia hitman as the primary suspect in the jailhouse murder, but the fact, you see, that he was killed before he was even processed into the facility tells us it had to be someone with inside information, the kind of information that a former director of the FBI would be able to obtain. And here, as Dave Hodges has observed, Robert Mueller stood to gain the most from the murder of Whitey Bulger, the damning evidence. James Whitey Bulger, who was captured in 2011 after 16 years on the run, was found dead at a high-security facility in West Virginia. Robert Mueller plays a prominent role in this story. Could Mueller be connected to the mysterious death? How does Bulger go into a secure facility and be killed the first day? The bottom line is Robert Mueller played a prominent role in the reason why Bulger got away with criminal enterprising and murder for as long as he did. And we are entrusting the man who made Bulger's antics possible to continue the investigation of our president in one that hasn't yielded a shred of evidence against Trump in nearly 2 years. With the death of Whitey Bulger, Mueller is able to erase much of his criminal past in association with the mafia in Boston. You don't believe it? The evidence is overwhelming. Mueller stood to gain the most from Whitey Bulger's murder. Here's a bit of a story about it, again from Dave Hodges. What role did Robert Mueller play in the illegal conflict of interest, very cozy relationship between the FBI and the Boston Mafia that resulted in multiple murders, blackmail, RICO violations, witness tampering, many more crimes involving FBI complicity under the direction of Robert Mueller? Special counsel Robert Mueller, appointed to remove Trump from office, was presented by the mainstream media as this pristine man of impeccable integrity when nothing could have been further from the truth. Both Mueller and former and disgraced FBI Director James Comey had their images crafted by the mainstream media in the same manner. However, it's now been demonstrated that Comey leaked classified information he thought would be damaging to Trump. He committed perjury to Congress. Comey should be in prison, not making book deals. And one can be certain a book deal awaits Mueller as well, should he be able to remove Trump. Both men are lying, extreme left-wing freaks who should be in prison. Of the two, Mueller's activity is far more criminal than Comey's. Comey should not necessarily be charged with murder, but Mueller should. Investigative journalist Sarah Carter's blog, Questions Still Surround Mueller's Boston Past, published on March 20th, raises serious legal concerns regarding Mueller's past. This is in reference to what is often referred to as the Whitey Bulger FBI mob case. The New American Detail recounted the 1998 Whitey Bulger case as FBI covering for criminals, which was about the murderous boss of Boston's notorious Winter Hill gang, Whitey Bulger, as his gang of Irish mafia carried out a reign of murderous terror under the protection of the FBI, under the direction of then U.S. Attorney to Boston Robert Mueller, and the cover-up continued after Mueller's appointment as FBI director. Time after time, Massachusetts state and local police had their elaborate years-long investigation of the Bulger foiled by FBI interference, and at the center of it all was Robert Mueller. But get this, Mueller's entanglements are even more profound. This is a very disturbing video I've just uncovered about Robert Mueller and JFK. Brian, you're going to be astonished. Robert Mueller married Anne Cabell Standish, and there's a lot you need to know about Anne Cabell Standish. Profoundly disturbing.
Oh.
Here is a video about it, my friend. It should, here we go.
Let me introduce you to the man of the hour in Washington, D.C., Robert Swan Mueller III. Robert was born into the upper crust in our American class system. At one point in his education in private schools, John Kerry was his classmate. Mueller met his eventual bride, Anne Cabell Standish, at one of the dances they attended. They married in 1966, 3 years after JFK's fateful trip to Dallas, Texas, on November 22nd, 1963. For those of you that have read a lot about JFK, you'll recognize her middle name. Her grandfather, Charles Cabell, had been second in command at the CIA when John Kennedy was elected president. In January of 1962, President Kennedy fired 3 men from leadership positions at the CIA: Director Allen Dulles, Cabell, and Richard Bissell. Charles Cabell was Anne's grandfather. Her grand-uncle, Earl Cabell, was the mayor of Dallas at the time of Kennedy's assassination. Recently, declassified JFK documents revealed that Mayor Cabell was also an asset of the CIA at the time. It's a small world, isn't it? You could say that Robert Mueller married into the CIA, except that his great-uncle was Richard Bissell. So, Robert Swan Mueller III is related either through marriage or birth to 2 of the 3 people that Kennedy fired, as well as the mayor who hosted the assassination.
Wow.
The man fired was Allen Dulles, who sat on the Warren Commission and managed to keep the CIA out of the investigation into JFK's assassination. Maybe Dulles was a guest at Robert Mueller's wedding. It is a small world, isn't it? For Headlines with a Voice, this is Nancy Morgan Hart.
Wow, that's too close for comfort.
And I gotta say, it turns out in the latest release of JFK documents that Earl Cabell joined the agency in 1956.
Yeah.
And it's also the case, of course, that Mueller was involved in the sale of uranium to the Russians on behalf of the Clinton Foundation. Brian, if you want more signs of corruption, Perhaps if Robert Mueller wants to investigate Russian collusion, he should start with himself. At one time, I had a problem with Mueller's appointment as special counsel because of his former friendship with disgraced director James Comey. This is Dave Hodges. While looking in the rear-view mirror of recent history, my concern is trivial compared to what is presently being revealed. The stakes have grown to tremendous proportions, and Mueller is being proven guilty of multiple felonies, as well as treason, which is an offense that is punishable by death. Former FBI Director Mueller was appointed as special counsel for the sole purpose of investigating possible Russian collusion charges between President Trump's campaign and the Russian government. On the heels of the collusion, Mueller is also looking for the smoking gun for obstruction of justice on the part of Trump, the same charge that ultimately brought down the presidency of Richard Nixon. However, sometimes life is ironic, and in a stunning development, WikiLeaks' Julian Assange tweeted a released State Department cable, which clearly and irrefutably proves that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton ordered former FBI Director and present Special Counsel Robert Mueller to deliver a sample of the stolen, highly enriched uranium to Russia in 2009 to seal the deal, Brian.
Wow.
It's a nice summing up. Russian collusion, it was Hillary all along. Russian investigation is beginning to look as if the claims of monstrous collusion between Russian officials and U.S. political operatives were true, but it wasn't Donald Trump who was guilty of Russian collusion. It was Hillary Clinton and U.S. intelligence officials who worked with Russians and others to entrap Trump.
Well, they turn the truth on its head. That's what they do.
Isn't it astonishing, Brian? Yeah. That's a stunning conclusion of a Real Clear Investigations report. This is from Real Clear Politics, which is one of the best sources on political developments in the United States, who looked in depth at the controversial June 2016 Trump Tower meeting between officials of then-candidate Donald Trump's campaign staff and a Russian lawyer known to have ties with high-level officials in Vladimir Putin's government. The media have spun a tale of Trump selling his soul to the Russians for campaign dirt to use against Hillary, beginning with the now infamous Trump Tower meeting. But a growing body of evidence indicates the meeting may have been a setup, part of a broad effort to tarnish the Trump campaign involving Hillary Clinton operatives employed by Kremlin-linked figures and Department of Justice officials, as we have been documenting here. The media played a crucial role. Here's the health ranger Mike Adams reporting the mainstream media is a part of the biggest scandal in U.S. history. The mainstream media is covering up for the FBI, deep state, and Democrat scandal because they are a part of this. It's their job to use propaganda to alter public opinion, and they have done it well. WikiLeaks has exposed how the Council on Foreign Relations controls almost all mainstream media. It's no secret over the last 4 decades, mainstream media has been consolidated from dozens of competing companies to only 6. Hundreds of channels, websites, news outlets, newspapers, magazines, making up 90% of all media, is controlled by very few, giving Americans the illusion of choice. But it's only an illusion. While 6 companies control almost everything the Western world consumes in regard to media, sounds like a sinister plot. The Swiss Propaganda Research Center has just released information that is even worse. The research group was able to tie all these foreign media companies to a single organization, the Council on Foreign Relations, which is as deep state as it gets, Brian.
Yeah,
but the deep state, the CIA is working very powerfully in collaboration with Mossad and with Israeli intel ops. So we have, as I reported on the new JFK show, number 218, Operation Mockingbird, the agency began infesting the mainstream media in the 1950s, so that by 1975, its then director, William Colby, was able to testify to Congress that the agency owned everyone of any significance in the media. A report in Rolling Stone in 1977 by Carl Bernstein confirming that high agency officials had confirmed the greatest successes had been with Time Life, the New York Times, and CBS. And Brian, as you well know, in that era, if you controlled Time Life, the New York Times, and CBS, you had a lock on the dissemination of news.
Yeah, before the internet.
Today it's grown even worse. So that you take 100 officials from CNN, they're all dual U.S. Israeli citizens, Brian. You take 100 officials from CNN, from NBC. They're all dual U.S. Israeli citizens, all of them. Take 100 officials from the New York Times. They're all dual U.S. Israeli citizens, Brian. This is why the American people is being so egregiously played. And get this, from Noam Chomsky, who's an icon of the left.
Yeah, nice of him to say that.
Russian interference isn't influencing U.S. elections, but Israel definitely is. World-renowned author and lecturer Noam Chomsky pointed out in a recent interview that Israel has actually had far more influence in the United States political system than Russia ever has in the wake of mass media hysteria about alleged collusion in the 2016 election. In an interview with Amy Goodman on Democracy Now!, Chomsky said, so take, say, the huge issue of interference in our pristine elections. Do the Russians interfere in our elections? An issue of overwhelming concern in the media. I mean, in most of the world, that's almost a joke. First of all, if you're interested in foreign interference in our elections, whatever the Russians may have done barely counts or weighs in the balance as compared with what another state does, openly, brazenly, and with enormous support. Israeli intervention in U.S. elections vastly overwhelms anything the Russians may have done. I mean, even to the point where the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, goes directly to Congress with overwhelming applause to try to undermine the president's policies. What happened with Obama and Netanyahu in 2015? What happened with Obama and Netanyahu in 2015? Did Putin come to give an address to the joint sessions of Congress, trying to call on them to reverse U.S. policy without even informing the president? And that's just a tiny bit of this overwhelming influence. So if you happen to be interested in the influence of foreign influence on elections, there are places to look, but even that is a joke. Chomsky went on to point out that that's only one part of it. Lobbyists practically write legislation in congressional offices in massive ways. The concentrated private capital, corporate, Rust sector, super wealth intervene in our elections, massively overwhelming to the extent the most elementary principles of democracy are undermined. Now, of course, all that is technically legal, but that tells you something about the way society functions. So if you're concerned with our elections and how they operate and how they relate to what would happen in a democratic society, take a look at Russian hacking. Taking a look at Russian hacking is absolutely the wrong place to look. Well, you see occasionally some attention to these matters in the media, but very minor as compared with the extremely marginal question of Russian hacking. Chomsky is one of the few intellectuals in the public eye who can get away with being so critical of Israel because he has Jewish heritage, despite being non-religious. It's common for anyone critical of Israel's policies to be labeled an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Brian, as you well know, censorship is killing America. YouTube hit InfoWars with 3 strikes as a free speech purge has gone nuclear. Alex Jones explains the real agenda behind the censorship after InfoWars was hit with a 3rd strike on its YouTube channel and faced deletion. Internet censorship. After 1 strike was removed earlier, YouTube hit Alex Jones' channel with a 3rd strike for a video that had already appeared and been restored. In the video, Jones clearly explains how the victims of the Parkland shooting were not crisis actors. The fact is they actually were student crisis actors, as we've demonstrated ourselves in our own video report on this, Brian. YouTube's flagging system is clearly being abused in a flagrant effort to shut down InfoWars following a public campaign by CNN. This sets a horrific precedent for free expression, and the First Amendment in YouTube is in direct violation of the Communications Decency Act in adopting this approach. YouTube is even using artificial intelligence to delete channels to handle subsequent appeals. None of it involves an actual human being. They're doing it all in an automated fashion. Hello. Thank you for your account suspension appeal. We have decided to keep your account suspended based on our community guidelines and terms of service. Please visit for more information. Thank you, the YouTube team. Short and sweet for Google. I wrote to them using their appeal form last Thursday evening asking for an explanation for the deletion of my channel. I was polite but firm and asked for a contact, a name, someone I could speak with. Just for the record, as I know their subscriber interaction is run by AI now. Stop and think about that for a minute. A machine decided to delete my channel. I'm then reduced to appealing to the same machine to have my intellectual property restored for me. We're now living Blade Runner, Judge Dredd, Demolition Man, and any other sci-fi flick about a dystopian future.
It's happened to me too.
I know, Brian. Massive outpouring of support for the Health Ranger after outrageous YouTube censorship of entire channel, wiping 1,700 plus videos spanning 10 years.
I lost 1,700 videos spanning 7 years.
And this was after they went back and struck an interview he'd done with me back in 2015 about the banning of the book, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, Brian. They banned it. They took down his whole channel for that. And look at the absurdity of the situation when it comes to demonizing Putin and Trump. It's okay for Bill Clinton to laugh with Vladimir Putin. It's okay for George W. Bush. It's okay for Chuck Schumer. It's okay for Hillary Clinton. It's okay for Barack Obama. But Donald Trump enters into solemn negotiations with Russia, which would be a good thing, and he's a traitor. AIM has revealed the inside dope about the Mueller report. This is very significant. Just as Rob Rosenstein has announced twice before, no collusion or conspiracy between Trump and Russia, nor between Team Trump and Russia. No obstruction of justice in firing James Comey. In fact, after more than $30 million for the special investigation, all we found was Paul Manafort's tax evasion. Mueller's investigation found the same thing. The previous 3 investigations into Trump-Russia collusion and Russian meddling in the election to support Trump found nothing. Now, Hillary may still get her wish. I mean, it's white. It's a house. So what difference at this point does it make if she's incarcerated at Guantanamo?
Yeah.
If she's in Guantanamo, Hillary deserves this manifestly more than any other American to my knowledge. Let me just say, I was interviewed on Press TV against a fellow named Greg Under on the debate, where Unger has published a book entitled House of Trump, House of Sod, where he's seeking to make the case and was actually asserting that Donald Trump is a stooge of Russia. I did a rather thorough debunking. You can find this on my own blog at jamesfetzer.org, including not only the transcript, where they sought to intervene. They introduced a 15-second delay in my answers, which was untrue for Carl Unger, and they added noise to garble my response, so I had it transcribed. You can read the transcript. In very brief compass, I go through the big picture regarding the Russia hoax, just as we've discussed today, and I reaffirm the place to go, the right place to go. Greg Jarrett, the Russia hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump. Brian, this is monstrous. And as I have suggested to you, this appears to me to be a greater scam on the American people and more treacherous than either the assassination of JFK or even the events of 9/11, because it's deep, it's profound, it's systemic, and it has corrupted our government from the inside out.
Yeah, I want to ask, people ask, what is Trump doing about this? Like what they say, why doesn't Trump put Hillary and Obama in jail? Do you think he wants to keep the stability of the state intact and not to actually put these people in jail?
Brian, what could be more obvious? That would be accused of being deliberately partisan, silencing his critics. He's got to let it play out. Let the Mueller come to nothing. AIM has warned us, advised us of what's going to be the content. They're going to find nothing. The right thing for Donald Trump to do is to allow the Mueller investigation to play out. It's going to be self-defeating. It's going to have no content. We got the real story here. Any other action he took in the meanwhile would be viewed as radically partisan and could even lead to his impeachment. So, Brian, he's handling it properly at the present time.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, I can just let it play itself out, because of course the media hates Trump. The media is constantly ganging up on Trump all the time. Yeah.
Well, Brian, I want to thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, it's been a great 2 hours, and this is one of your best presentations yet. I can't wait to get this out to the world. Thank you so much for being on the Brian Ruhe Show. It's an honor to have you, Jim. Thank you very much.
My great pleasure, Brian. I look forward to sharing this with the American people.
Very good. Okay. See you on another one soon, I hope.